Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for just a relationship and one another. Father, we ask that you just bring us closer to you, allow us to minister to the people that you have presented before us. Father, we pray that everybody that watches this video is able just to get something out of it. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. What's up, beautiful people? Shell
and Aaron, barely.
Here at A Radical Relationship, and we are back this week with another video. If you have not already, definitely subscribe to the channel so that you can get those notifications each week when we go up at 7 a.m. on Thursday mornings. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe.
What?
So this week, in light of the fact that the holiday season is approaching, and in light of the fact that this topic has also played such a huge role in our individual testimonies and walks with God, we wanted to discuss grief with God. What that has looked like in our lives in different moments where we've experienced loss in some form and have had to grieve, whether we grieved well or didn't grieve well, and just any nuggets that we would share with you all, our community, around this topic, just based on our personal experience. So, ready to dive in, babe?
Yep.
Cool. So, the first thing that I was thinking about with grief for you was about how the loss of people close to you were kind of the catalyst and the thing that really kind of like made you hit a downward spiral at some point. So would you just like recap for people who haven't seen the testimony videos, if you haven't, go back and check those out, what that loss was, and just walk us through what that was like.
So I think it was in like 2012 or so, maybe. Anyways, beginning of the semester, my junior year of college, my grandma passed away. Before that, you know, she had dementia, so that was already really hard. And she was like the closest person to me, so that was a big loss for me. You know, she was that one person that I could talk to whenever I needed to like get answers or wisdom, or and whenever I just needed somebody to help me with anything, she would be the one to give me that advice. Shortly after that, my best friend overdosed, like the week before my birthday, which was in October. So it was just a couple months right after that, just a couple months. And it was sad too, because that same day, you know, I got kicked out of my fraternity. It was just it was bad. And also, you know, he was one of those people that helped me overcome the loss of my grandma. So it was like, you know, I had this friend I was able to talk to because he had lost his dad as well. And we were both kind of grieving together, helping one another through that time of grief. You know, I was helping him, he was helping me. We were best friends. We were there for one another. So losing him was just like a whole nother just blow to the stomach. You know, it was terrible. And then one of my other friends, she was like a big sister to me. She got in a tragic car accident on Christmas Eve, just a couple months right after that. And she passed away. And that was another tragic blow, because, you know, she was another one of those people that was helping me overcome the loss of, you know, my past to my grandma and my best friend. She was that person, you know, that was helping me during that time of grief, and I lost her. So it was really, really hard for me. I pretty much just gave up at life and everything. You know, I can tell you that for a time, you know, I was pretty popular. I had a lot of friends. I knew a lot of people. But I kind of just dug myself into a hole of isolation. And it seemed like right after that, everybody else eventually was just gone. You know, they had all just carried on with their lives, done their thing. You know, I was still in college at the time, kind of at a standstill. Everybody was graduating, everybody was gone, all these new people were coming in. And by the time I kind of just figured out what was going on, I was all by myself. I buried myself in a pit of depression, really at the bottom of a bottle every single day, and just smoking mass amounts of marijuana, just trying to really forget. That was the hardest thing. I really didn't, just having those memories and those things was really painful, and not having anybody that I felt open enough to talk to about those things with was another struggle for me. I felt like I had lost everyone. So that was difficult for me. That was probably like, by the grace of God, I graduated college, but I still just was suffering from those things. It wasn't until I came to Memphis to Teen Challenge, and I finally decided to accept Jesus as Lord of my life, and really learn healthy habits about dealing with just all types of things, giving it to God, but also like surrounding myself with people that I feel comfortable opening up to, and talking about things with, because that's the most important part right there. Yeah, we all need to talk to God, we all need to get into prayer and meditation and have our alone time, but we need to find real people that we can communicate with and talk about our struggles with, just even if they're just there to listen. I'm not necessarily finding people to give me advice, but finding good Christian people that are just ready to listen.
Mm-hmm. So community is important.
Mm-hmm. Very important.
Yeah. We both know from experience, and just also having conversations with other people, just how much of a blow loss can be to your faith. Definitely as it concerns like death, physical death of loved ones. I've had my fair share of experiencing that as well, and just the ways that it can just make you question if God truly cares, or if God is in your corner, when you don't understand why he would allow such important people in your life to be taken away from you, and sometimes in really tragic ways.
Yeah.
I think for me, I remember when I first became a Christian, and the person who was discipling me at the time, Carmen, she asked me a really important question, which was, what did I think would be the thing that would cause me to walk away? And she was asking that with the intention of dealing with whatever that thing was on the front end. And at that time, I said death of loved ones. I had experienced my fair share of that, starting in high school with my boyfriend at the time in high school passing away. My grandmother ended up passing away just a few months before I was about to graduate. The mom of my boyfriend passed away from cancer when I was in college. I had great aunts who passed away in those years. And so it had gotten to the point in college that like anytime my mom called me twice, my heart would just sink, because I'm like, oh God, who now? And so at that point, not being really far removed from that, I just really felt like death was the one thing I could never understand. It was the one thing that I couldn't make sense of. I couldn't like think about it enough and wrestle with it enough to come to some super faithful conclusion about why, other than like it's a natural part of life. But all of those circumstances have been like tragic. Like my grandmother died from a brain aneurysm out of nowhere. Like she was healthy one day, in the hospital the next day, and then dead within a couple weeks. My boyfriend, who had passed away, like heart collapsed, didn't make it to the hospital. His mom died of cancer. So it was just those things that like you didn't even really have time to seriously even prepare your heart for it, like death can often be. It was just make it make sense. And so, and even being fresh in my faith, I just didn't have an answer. And so I just felt like that just seems very brutal from God, and I don't know if I can't make sense of it. I don't know if I can follow a God that feels that brutal. But having experienced death since then, I think is one of those things that I have grown to be surrendered to. That may be one of those things that I just never die having the answer to, and I don't need that answer in order to continue to profess Jesus as Lord. It's hard, it's uncomfortable. I would love to have the answers. I would love to have something super faithful to be able to lean on to, and make sense of different situations, but that's just not always the case, you know. There may be different ways that I can come to terms with different situations and different grief, but there is no just blanket faithful answer as to the why and the when and the how it happens. For me, it's just one of those things that I've just come to accept is simply going to be a part of this side of heaven, and I may never understand, but it's not enough to make me turn my back on God or not want to live my life as a Christian. So babe, what would you say now in retrospect, being on the other side of things? I know you talked a little bit about this, but what are ways that you feel people can deal with grief with God, going back to some of the things that you talked about before, like in a healthy way?
Yeah, just, you know, community. Surround yourself with people that you can talk to that are gonna be there just to listen, and really just pouring yourself out, you know, in prayer to God, not holding anything back, making yourself vulnerable. I think that was probably the hardest part for me. Was I didn't want to be perceived as weak, you know. So, and then for men, it's a lot more difficult for us because we don't want to make ourselves vulnerable, you know. Sometimes, like when we're going through a hard day, instead of crying and getting real emotional and honest with ourselves, we turn to rage and anger. That tough guy routine, like I know I did. I was I was angry, you know. I was angry with everybody and everything, and that was just in itself like just a bad combination. Another thing is, you know, I was thinking about this morning, and I don't even want to take this the wrong way, but, you know, we as human beings really a lot of times tend to idolize relationships. And I know that's true in my life, most definitely, because I was thinking about it. I was like, man, like, how is it that I let somebody, you know, their life have so much effect over my life? Because I was thinking about it today, you know, the loss of my best friend and whatnot, the things that we were preparing for during that time, and how I had given up everything that we were working towards, that we were preparing for, everything that I was building in my life at that time. I just threw it all away because I was so heartbroken at the loss of him. So I just decided to I just threw my life away because I idolized that friendship so much that without him being there, without him being present, I didn't feel like it, you know, like it was worth it. I didn't feel like I could do it. I didn't feel like I wanted to do it. And I was like, you know, I just really started thinking about back to, you know, putting God first, loving myself, and then loving others, you know. But I would feel like I was more so dependent upon those people and those relationships, because once they left my life, I was paralyzed.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Just thinking about like the place that we put people in our lives. Love that. I really appreciated what you said just about the vulnerability as well, because I think there's a saying that like sometimes the only way to the other side is just through. Like you can't go around it, you can't go over it, can't go under it. Like you just gotta go through it. And grief is that. Like ain't no way around it. If you think that you about to escape this grieving process, it's gonna find you at some point. It's gonna catch back up to you. Like you might outrun it for a while, but it's gonna catch up one way or another. And so just to like buckle down and go through it, be raw, be honest. For me, that vulnerability needed to look like letting the emotion be whatever the emotion was in the moment. I always like to try to put a bow on it and then come back to that emotion at a more appropriate time in my quiet times with God or something like that. I was good about like telling God how I felt and stuff like that, but a huge part of grief in a healthy way for me ended up being like, because I wasn't always super vulnerable in the moment, being able to just be vulnerable in the moment. Like if it didn't feel appropriate or if it didn't feel like the right time, just allowing that to be okay, you know, and being transparent with people like, man, I'm really having a hard time about this specific thing today. I can remember times when like it would be my grandmother's birthday, or it would be like the day that my ex-boyfriend had passed away or my grandmother had passed away, and I would just be feeling some type of way before realizing that it was that day. And then like I would see the date somewhere or something like that randomly, and I've heard other people talk about experiencing this. It's like, oh, you know, like 10 years later on that day, I'm still experiencing some kind of emotion even when cognitively I'm not aware that it's that day. And it's because like that's just how we're wired, you know. Some of those things just impress upon our minds and hearts that way. So I think like, yes to the community, yes to vulnerability and transparency with people, and allowing ourselves to be weak. For women out there like me, like allowing yourself to be weak and vulnerable in the moment, not just in your times with God, but even when it feels convenient, and just pressing in, like not trying to go around and not trying to put it off for what you feel like is going to be a better time, but just accepting that like, man, the only way to get to the other side of this is just to allow myself to experience this, whatever that looks like. Even if you feel like it looks like being way too depressed, you know, or sleeping way too much, or whatever the case may be, like just letting yourself be whatever it is in that moment, as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I probably wish I would have done, having going back, would be, you know, back to the kind of vulnerability aspect of it, would be, you know, seeking professional help. That was definitely something I wish that I would have probably done, because I mean, I was struggling, you know, almost 10 years later, you know, just now, like learning to come to terms with some of the things that I had been suffering from that I didn't even know that were still like buried deep down in my heart, that I was still suffering, you know, bitterness and anger and all these things I had rooted deep down in me, and I had to trace them back to the source. And I think that if I would have got professional help, you know, a lot sooner, yeah, community, yeah, like prayer and all these things, but also, you know, like don't how do I say this, don't knock it till you try it, you know. I think a lot of times, you know, like I said, going back to being vulnerable, that's one of those areas, you know, oh, I'm all right, oh, I'm fine, you know. I like, we like to brush it off and tell ourselves that, but I think that seeking professional help from they don't have to be Christian. Yeah, I know where my beliefs are and where my stand, you know, what I believe, but I also know that, you know, there are things like everything has a spiritual translation, you know, in this world, but also, you know, God also put doctors in this world, people, you know, to help support us in ways that we need. And I really just, my heart goes out to anybody who's, you know, going through depression or anything like that, to definitely just to seek professional help. Because it can all, you know, and sometimes you gotta try. You know, going through high school and whatnot, I bounced around with my anger problems and whatnot to different psychologists or psychotherapists, whatever you want to call them, pastors and whatnot. I'd bounced around to a number of them, you know, just trying to find the one that suited me, that fit me and my needs and what I needed. And, you know, so I definitely encourage that.
Yeah, I too have, I've sought professional help as well, going through my divorce. was in counseling at that time, way past, you know, the time of the divorce, even moving home. When I moved back home to Tennessee, got back into counseling and some coaching as well. And it's just really good for just like stringing the pearls, right? Like sometimes you know what it is that you're experiencing, but you can't string all the pearls. You don't know that it ties back to this thing that then ties into this thing, to this thing, to this thing, to realize how all these different components of your life are coming together to affect you in this way. So I found professional help to be really good in that sense as well. Yes, talking through the current situation that I was going through, but also just being really helpful in identifying even parts of my past that were contributing, because up until the time that I went through my divorce, I had never had counseling before. I had never had a reason to have counseling. And so if you've never been in counseling, like, I think that it's a great proactive resource. Coaching as well, a great proactive resource, because what I like to say is you don't know what you don't know. So like, even if you grew up in what you feel like was a pretty healthy home, we're in a fallen world. And so we're just bound to be affected by things, even if we grew up in a healthy home. So it's just nice to be able to get ahead of knowing those things about yourself, so that when you meet your person, or if you're currently in a relationship with your person or dating your person, then you can better communicate parts of you to them that can help you all have a better relationship when your understanding of self has increased.
So you said something about, you know, we're in this fallen world. You know, we live in this world, and a lot of times, you know, people like to make, like I said also, you know, that when you're seeking help, you don't necessarily have to go to a pastor, or they have to be Christian. Because when I was going through my rough spot, you know, everybody was trying to give me a spiritual explanation. You know, hey, just pray, hey, just this. And I was like, no, like, you don't understand what I'm going through. You need to hear me out. Like, and I say that because, you know, we live in the world, and we face things that are of this world. And sometimes, you know, we need a worldly perspective of things to help kind of balance the equation out for us. You know, yeah, like, I believed in God, and yeah, you know, I knew about all these things, but I also needed somebody that was going to understand from a worldly perspective, you know, what I was going through, how I was feeling, and why I was feeling these ways. And like, you know, so that I can kind of just broaden my horizons to help me better heal.
Yeah, that's good. Sometimes it just is what it is. Like, it ain't supernatural, it ain't that deep. It's just, it's the world we live in, y'all, and things happen.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
And it sucks, but
right. Yeah. So with that, hope that something that was said was helpful during this time, whether it's you being able to resonate with our stories of different loss, or being able to take away some of those things that we suggested for dealing with grief for your own time. We understand that the holiday season can be really tough in this way, even for old wounds, you know, that can come back and just feel fresh again. And so we're always here, you know, to support the community in any ways that we can. We are grateful to have the support that we have in one another through this time. We are blessed to be a part of great communities, both in our family, you know, our relatives, and each other as our own family unit, but then also just spiritual community and friends. We are just really fortunate in that area to be surrounded by amazing people, and we are definitely not lacking in that area. So hopefully some of that helps. Definitely feel free to reach out on social media or via email if you feel like there's any more conversation that can be had around this one-on-one that would be more helpful for you. Until next time, folks, we are out. Bye, y'all.
Bye.